Hi, I'm Curt Doty with RealmIQ. This is our podcast, RealmIQ Sessions, where we talk about everything AI with AI leaders from around the world. Please give us a follow or subscribe. Today's guest is Amanda Peterson. Amanda has had diverse roles in psychology, data science, and user-centric product development. She has been a product manager and software engineer across startups and larger corporations, and is currently head of product at Ovationz. That's with a Z. Welcome, Amanda. We want to talk AI, so let's get into it.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
We're excited to have you. We met through Ovationz, the current company that you're at, and
we did.
And it came on a little after I had joined as a speaker. And I think you're a welcome addition. Feel free to tell us about Ovationz, and then also, do you have any AI plans, and whether it's speaking engagements and or technology, and then what, how does your intersection of AI happened to intersect with your career? So please elaborate.
Yeah, well, let me go ahead and start off with explaining a little about Ovationz. Ovationz is a two-sided marketplace that is a little bit similar to Cameo. I know that you're already on Ovationz, Curt, but have you also heard of Cameo?
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Okay. Well, that's how I like to describe it.
George Santos is making
really
a killing.
Them. Yeah. So basically, Ovationz, the way I like to describe it, is very similar to Cameo, but it's for more professional speaking engagements. So what we're trying to do is basically help our speakers monetize their time and talent, and also to get discovered and to grow their network so that they can speak at other events where they might not already have that connection. So I know that, Curt, you're one of our speakers. Through the Ovationz platform, ideally someone outside of your network could see your name pop up. Maybe they go onto our landing page, they do a search for the topic AI, and then they find your name and they're like, oh, who's this guy? Who's Curt? And then they can read about you. Yeah, and then they can book you to speak for whatever type of event that they're planning. So that is what we are trying to do at Ovationz. So yeah,
it's awesome. I love the platform, and it's really easy to use, and it's like the LinkedIn for Cameo, right? It's like,
yes,
LinkedIn Cameo, do a mashup.
That's right.
It's
marrying
really cool.
Things together.
Yeah, no, it's I think there's a market fit, and the AI conferences have exploded all over the globe. I think just in the Bay Area alone, there was like 100 last year. I mean, it's just crazy. So I think adding AI as a filter for types of speakers and types of subjects, I think is a great addition. So that's awesome. So tell us about your background and how you came to be at Ovationz, and where had you worked prior?
Yeah, I would love to. So I'm going to try and give you a little roadmap because my background is pretty diverse. People have called my background a little bit like a unicorn because I've done so many different things. But yeah, I'm going to try and highlight how I got into data. That happened around 2014. And then my most recent project that I'm working on, I'm actually giving a lightning talk about it tonight at Microsoft with their AI ML tech talk. And I will be announcing, talking about Producer, which is what I'm working on currently. But to sort of go back to the beginning, my story really starts with an interest in behavior change, and I guess more specifically around addiction. So I grew up in a very religious community and culture. I grew up Mormon, and there were a lot of sort of people, I guess, in my community that had like different types of addictions growing up. And I think that that's fairly common in a religious culture where there are a lot of rules like no alcohol, no smoking, no sex before marriage. And actually, when I was at BYU, I did BYU undergrad and grad school. I went to law school and business school. Undergrad, I studied psychology, and my very last year there, I worked with hundreds of students across campus that had a very specific type of addiction, and also in the Women's Services Center with females who are struggling with eating disorders. And I think that from a very early young age, I really kind of became well versed in what addiction looks like, both individually for the person and also how it impacts the people that are closest to them. I also observed that people who are really trying to stop engaging in some type of unwanted behavior that shows up as an addiction, they are very motivated. They're almost entrepreneurial because they are driven to find a solution to this very personal problem that they have. And they're also very hungry for data as they are trying to come up with solutions and test out different theories that could be helpful for them in managing whatever it is they're working on. They are looking for patterns, like when is it that I would, like make this bad decision? Or, like sort of what are the leading causes up to this kind of like, decision making experience.
Yeah.
So was very interested in that my undergrad. And then I decided to go to law school, and I was very interested in being a public defender. I wanted to defend people who were about to lose their liberty, but then got a little bit impatient with the public legal system and was very attracted to the way that I, from the outside looking in, saw businesses doing things. So I did this internship with PwC with their people and change department. And then, that's when I started doing the joint 80 MBA program. And then after that, I immediately went to San Francisco. It was my first time in the Bay Area. I was doing a startup nonprofit with two friends who were co-founding it. It was called the Reset Foundation. What the Reset Foundation was trying to do is to create an alternative to prison for people going to jail. So rather than taking someone and sending them to jail for 3 years, and within that experience, they wouldn't normally start a reentry program until about 3 months prior to them going back into their community. So you have a lot of time wasted, really. What we wanted to do is to, instead of sending them to that type of environment and structure, we thought, what if we sent them to a place that felt and operated like a Google campus? And so that's where we designed this idea of the Reset campus. We wanted it to look and feel completely different from prison. And it was specifically for people 18 to 25 years old. So people who had aged out of the public school system that did not have a high school diploma. And that was the population that we were working with. So as I started to kind of dive into this new role, one thing that I learned is that the 18 to 25-year-olds that we were working with without a high school diploma were on a 6th grade reading or math level, which I think is fairly common. Education is really a perfect example of things that require nuance and personalization, which is really what data allows us to do. Healthcare is also a huge thing there. So I started to explore different tools to help create a more customized learning experience. And that was the first time that I came across adaptive learning models. And I think at that time in 2014, Duolingo was really at the start of the show. And I had used Duolingo, a little bit, but basically, or it's almost very similar to the GMAT test. So if you and I were both taking the GMAT test, we would end up taking our own unique test, because what it does is it understands, based off of our interactions with the test, who we are, what our strengths are, what our weaknesses are. Duolingo the same. And then the test or the experience or the product will change to fit our specific needs. And then also based on the goals that whatever the product has. So I thought that was fascinating. And so I started to really think hard about this, and particularly in the mental health space. I thought it would be really great also. Mental health had this type of customization ability. So what I started developing at that time, I ended up leaving the Reset Foundation. I learned how to code by taking a full-time web development bootcamp. Later became a software engineer, back-end software engineer at a VR gaming company. But at this boot camp, the first app that I built, the first mobile app I built, was called Stress Less. And basically, what it did is it took the user journey of someone who experienced addiction or who was trying to stop engaging in some type of unwanted behavior. It would have a panic button so that when you found yourself at that crossroads and you felt like you were struggling and you were about to do something that you didn't want to do, you could press the panic button and then it would send out a text message to people that you had defined in your circle. And it wasn't necessarily meant to stop you. I think that, I'm a firm believer that it's, the time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining. So it's really hard to stop the behavior if you wait right sort of when you're there. It's a lot about preventative. But the benefit of doing that is that it really allowed people to communicate with their support network about what was going on. And one of the early users, he was actually in my coding bootcamp, his daughter was using it. She was at Berkeley, she was a freshman, and she was struggling with anxiety. And he said that it was really illuminating to him because when he had heard his daughter struggling about anxiety, he thought that it was like something that maybe happened like once a week or once every couple of weeks. But she was pressing the panic button quite often. And he said he just never realized how all-consuming those feelings of anxiety were for her. And I think too, if we're struggling, with some type of behavior change, it's not really easy to talk about. Like, I wouldn't just necessarily call up my friend Curt and say, hey, I'm like really struggling with this addiction right now,
Stressed out.
Right. But what Stressless did is it just said like, hey, this is Amanda going through a bit of a hard time and wanting to check in. Would be great if you could give me a call later and we could chat. So that way it sort of like was a soft way to break the ice and just let people know that like, it was a signal that I was having a hard time. And then it started to do the data component. So basically like, I think that there were a lot of things around that time where it relied on the user to log different thoughts, almost like a journal. But I wanted to create something that would be automated because I think that we don't always think to log those things. That's where data science with health with like trackers became really exciting because it's all about that passive collection of data where it's continuous. I don't have to do anything. So I was trying to replicate something like that at this very early stage by basically just like as soon as you could input some relevant information about like how your mood was, sort of like on a scale of 1 to 10, what you're feeling, some like quick metrics so that people would have a log and it would be easier once it was tied to the pressing of the panic button to actually make those entries. So that is how I first got into data science. And yeah, I'll pause because I know I'm like sharing a lot.
No, it's very interesting. I just wanted to ask, in terms of the data that you then received and tried to understand from it or learn from it, was there data visualization sent back to the user so that they could see from a graphical perspective frequency and kind of whatever realization of that or visualization of that data was to give them some insight beyond just a log? Because data, can be presented in many different ways. But did you find that data visualization was an asset or direction in which you wanted to simplify that reporting?
Yes, great question. So I did use data visualization. There are lots of different ways to create that visualization, and I decided to do it day of the week. So yeah, you could basically see like which days of the week maybe, because I had a hypothesis that maybe like a weekend could be like something like if you had more downtime, because sometimes people would see things come up, if they got bored. But if they were busy, if they were working, if they were doing something that didn't happen very often. So I was trying to think about what type of information would be helpful, and then frequency. So you could also show and then just see over time, like sort of if the frequency count week over week was going up or down.
Cool. So does that app still exist in the App Store?
It doesn't. And it never made it to the App Store. So the boot camp that I did was full stack web development. And the way that I created it into a mobile app was using something called Ionic, which was a wrapper. It made this web screen into a mobile interface.
Okay.
So yeah, that's what I did. But I have done iterations off of Stressless, and what it exists as now, but it's still not in the App Store, unfortunately. But the design is there. It's called Ninja Trails. Did you ever play Oregon Trail, or do you know what that game is?
I'm not a big gamer, but I think I did hear of it. Yes.
Well, I'm not a gamer, but in grade school, I played Oregon Trail. I was on like our old Apple Macintosh computers. And yeah, it's basically kind of like you are making your way across this trail and you'll have people there with you, but then things will happen. Like someone will get dysphoria or you'll run out of food or your wagon will like topple over or
Yeah,
something.
right.
These scenarios can happen. So the game that I created, Ninja Trails, it's a spin-off of Oregon Trail, probably more loved by people who played Oregon Trail. But what it does is the idea is the game is supposed to be capturing data and specifically looking at compassion. So, amidst the scenario of you kind of going about these different experiences within the game, it basically looks specifically at how you show compassion to yourself and how you show compassion to other people in the game when different type of complex challenges or positive things might arise. And based off of that, what I was trying to do is both create a more specific diagnosis but then also treatment, which I think at the time of like even when early mental health things started coming out, it was all very focused on diagnosis. Like I've followed a lot of them throughout the years, and there was one called Mind Strong, which was founded by Tom Insel. Tom Insel was the director of the National Institute of Mental Health for I think a couple of decades, and then he moved to Google Verily or Google Life Science, and then he founded Mindstrong. Mindstrong was creating this digital prototyping tool on your phone that would basically track how you engage with your phone. And it would signal whether it thought you were encroaching on a level that might hit some type of unwanted behavior. But so I was trying to use this game as something similar. Like I wanted to, by measuring compassion, have it come up with, yeah, something more specific than just like depression or anxiety or addiction. Like find and create a more personal diagnosis. And then based off of that information, the game and the experience would change so that you would be able to practice those skills. Because I think at the end of the day, mental health is a lot about skill management, but I don't think that we take the time in our day. We're not used to carving out time to practice those things. And so similar to a gym, if you have a gym membership but you don't go, then it won't really do anything for you. I think if you sort of know what to do to manage your mental health, but if you don't have dedicated time to practice those things, then you can't expect to like develop that skill. So what the game would do is, you know, like maybe it understands that you get stressed when a negative thing happens. And so it would give you an opportunity to practice your response by giving you a negative experience and then trying to help guide you so that you're able to slow down and rather than react in a fight or flight mode, giving you things to help you to more methodically respond in a way that was more grounded.
That's fantastic. It's like the gamification of mental health treatment.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's cool. And then, I mean, obviously you're learning from the data. So machine learning is part of how you're sorting and representing data and recommendations. And do you consider that machine learning to be AI powered? I mean, you know, that's the big catchphrase these days. It's that, oh, we're powered by AI, right? Well, how exactly?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. That's something I have not considered. Is it AI powered? I guess I mean, an AI really, it's also very similar to a computer program. A computer program it will respond based off of given rules. And so basically how I saw this game working, it would just have a large rule set and it would be able to teach itself based off of the inputs it was receiving on how the user was interacting with the game. how to respond. So I guess you could call it AI powered, but it would definitely use machine learning models in order to train the model to know what it is to look for and what defined an act of compassion versus an act of like not being compassionate to yourself. And then what the follow-up response should be in order for that person to work on it.
Cool. So, yeah, you're talking about data, you're talking about health data. That's a big concern as some of these governments and certainly the EU is trying to give us some guidelines on what companies, tech companies, are doing with data. What's your point of view on the issue of protecting data in an AI era these days?
Yeah, I think that data protection is important for a lot of reasons. I think that even in order for people to feel comfortable to give their data, there should be clear regulations involved so that there is trust built with the. So yeah, I'm very interested in health data. I have a Garmin watch and it's tracking, my heart rate, tracking my sleep, my HRV, and yeah, I mean, I think that in the future, hopefully it could get more predictive. Like I could foresee something where, maybe it understands that, well, and it's about, yeah, if you could combine data. So I think where we would want to get, or where I think some people might find this creepy, but I think where data and I can really be life changing or game changing is if it could almost act like your personal assistant.
Yeah.
So it like knows everything that you hope to achieve personally, professionally, health wise. And it's constantly gathering every piece of data around you, including physiological response, your calendar, your spending habits, your eating habits. And it's able to, I always use the example, I might have used this with you, but in the early days of Microsoft Word, there was a little paper clip. And it would just give you, yeah, Clippy. And Clippy would give you tips. It might sort of see that you were hovering over something and it would say something like, oh, do you need help here? Well, maybe unbeknownst to me, because I'm running so fast and, trying to get so many things done, I start to realize that I'm, under breathing. Actually, that is a signal. I talk about this. A lot of times we'll end up holding our breath or under breathing, and our nervous system will actually engage in the physiological sigh, which is 2 inhales followed by this long extended exhale. Andrew Huberman talks a lot about this in his podcast, but it's the body's way of engaging our parasympathetic nervous system, our rest and our digest. And we will underbreathe a lot when we're texting, or maybe like even if we're scrolling through social media. And now that I've heard this, I catch myself doing this quite often. So I could imagine a little thing that says like, oh, hey, like you're in this, you have a call, in 30 minutes. You are sort of like starting to move into a fight or flight. Maybe it would be really helpful if you took 5 minutes to just like practice a breathing exercise. And maybe it sort of like knows the best way to calm me down, like the right audio, the right music, the right guided meditation. And maybe it also knows like based off of all of your caloric intake, we know that the best nutrition and food substance right now that you need that will also help your blood sugar levels, your stress levels would be a green smoothie, or something like that. And you happen to be, 5 blocks from a smoothie place. I don't know. I mean, it could get like very.
Yeah. Here's a coupon to Jamba Juice down the block, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It could get very sophisticated by just knowing exactly what you need. But in order for that to happen, it requires the user to basically give up all of their personal data.
Yeah.
And I think for people to feel comfortable with that, it requires a lot of trust. And I think in order for people to feel trust, they need to know that leaders are having really thoughtful conversations about this and trying to establish guidelines. I think that you'll feel this in any work setting. I don't expect the guidelines to be right on day one. What I almost wish could happen is just sort of this iterative process where we try something out, we give it a specific time box or a time frame for how long we're going to experiment with it. Then we're going to go through a feedback stage. We're going to hear from people to see like, okay, how are these guidelines working? Is it too restrictive? Is it too open? Are there loopholes that we're identifying? And then, sort of launch a V2 of those guidelines and then continuing to update the version through that feedback cycle.
Yeah. I mean, you're assuming that there's more intellect in the people who are governing us than I think there is.
Yeah.
But it is to the companies, right? They would go through this normal process, right? When defining their product, you're in product development, it's like, is there a market fit for this? What are the pros and cons? What are the repercussions? What are we doing with the data? What are the repercussions of sharing data? Will people share their data? Those are all valid questions in launching any product. So you're going to do that normally, right? But in terms of AI and the machine learning that happens from receiving that data, it isn't necessarily raw data. It's something else. It's elevated that, it's not clearly understood by the general public what is going on, what is actually going on. It's not just the selling of data, like, with Facebook, it's like, oh, this person watched all these sports videos, so now market sporting goods to them. It's like, that's pretty simple, a little creepy when, you only talk about sports and then all of a sudden you're seeing the ads, right? You didn't interact with any videos. That's what's creepy. But with AI, it's something entirely different in terms of what is happening with the data. And so it is up to big tech, because right now big tech is in control of the AI development. There's a lot of developers doing, wrapper type of products and stuff, but it's very expensive, so it still lies with big tech. And I'm hoping that some type of regulation will inspire responsibility in big tech. But I also think it needs consumer advocacy besides big tech lobbying, right? Because there are starting to be consortiums of big tech saying, oh yeah, we're going to take on this stuff. It's like, really? I don't believe it. And it's all putting on a good face, but I think consumer advocacy and the smaller, Davids versus the Goliaths, they're equally concerned and want their products to go and want to do things the right way and innovate for good. That's what seemingly needs to happen. But I'm encouraged that at least the governments are starting to give us some guidelines, because one, there was no guidelines when social media started, right? And just to complete the debacle now, hard to put the genie back in that bottle. Web3, the same thing. Crypto, the same thing. NFTs, the same thing. And, no regulations. And look where we are. So at least with generative AI, something's happening. And I'm encouraged by that. Will it go far enough? I don't know. I agree with you that it should be, an agile situation. Not that governments understand what the hell agile is, right? So no,
maybe
this is the law.
Next generation.
Yeah, the next show. Great. It'll help us next year. Okay, cool. So we have such an interesting background and very deep. We're getting close to a half an hour here, which we like to keep these conversations shorter than longer. Do you have any other points of view you want to share around AI, or any cautionary tales or success stories, or what's your vision, certainly even with Ovationz and AI as your head of product, that's in your wheelhouse, to see how you can integrate AI if at all? I don't know. That's a data engine too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think with Ovationz, probably what most companies could really benefit from is using data science and machine learning in order to create more personalized experiences and then to provide recommendations, which is exactly, zoomed out what I described with, your personal assistant being able to do for you in your life. But if I'm on Ovationz, and let's say that I am trying to plan an event, let's say that I need 20 different speakers across, 2 or 3 days, I think that personalization can come in by knowing, what type of speakers that I might be looking for. It would have to know something about me. So we would probably do a manual questionnaire, or maybe from a person's profile, to say, what type of events do you normally look for speakers for? What type of topics are you most interested in speakers who speak in? And then maybe we would look at the history. So maybe an individual has planned a lot of events around AI or maybe around health and wellness. Maybe they're specifically in some of these areas. And so what we would want to do is to help our bookers discover talent that would be really interesting to them. So again, it's almost kind of similar to TikTok. I think TikTok is a really great platform for discovery because unlike Instagram or Facebook, which is really your feed is based on the people that you follow, TikTok, at least from my experience, it's a lot about the content.
Yeah.
So if there is content that I tend to, engage in and watch for a long time, I will find lots of different people that I don't follow, that I've never heard of, that I would probably not otherwise engage with. But all of a sudden, that's probably the majority of my feed, people that I don't follow, but doing things around the content that I'm most interested in. So I think we would want to try to incorporate something because Ovationz is trying to help, people book these events. So anything that would help that experience to be easier, to be more successful, I think would benefit both sides.
Yeah, I mean it's a leap to think of Ovationz as possibly a content platform because you talked about TikTok, that is a content platform, but TikTok also I believe still has kind of a matchmaking component with influencers and brands and in support of advertising and sponsorship. So I think TikTok is an interesting model to, learn from. Certainly the popularity of it means they're doing something right. They've tapped into something that many companies have not. Certainly many social media companies have not. Well, fantastic. We want to give one last plug to Ovationz and then we'll close.
Yeah, whether you are a speaker and you're looking to do more talks in the next year, whether you're looking to plan events and discover new speakers, visit Ovationz and you can either sign up as speaking talent or you can book a speaker. You can find me on LinkedIn and would love to help you or hear any feedback that you have.
Awesome. Well, love this conversation, Amanda. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and catch more of our RealmIQ sessions on your favorite podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeart Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and of course, YouTube. Please follow and subscribe. It's very important. Thanks again, Amanda. Want to have you back and track your progress and great, stimulating, very different conversation. But I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Curt. It was great to be here.
Thanks, everyone. You can now catch RealmIQ sessions on your favorite podcast channels, including Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and iHeart Podcasts. Or listen to the full sessions at curtdoty.co/RealmIQ. If your company is interested in reaching an audience of AI professionals and decision makers to promote your event or product, we do have sponsorship opportunities. If you enjoy these discussions on AI, please push that subscribe button below. I'll see you in the next video.
RealmIQ. Book your corporate AI workshop today.
Subscribe to our Media Slam newsletter and learn more about the intersection of design, content, and technology. CurtDoty.co. Branding, marketing, and product development.